Hello everyone and welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. It's not Wednesday, it's not Hump Day, but it's Toddwatch. And I'm here joined today by Josh Brown. And Toddwatch is happening because Todd Howard has said something in the world. So what has he said, Josh? What has Todd Howard said?
Yes, indeed. Todd Howard has been doing the rounds. Obviously, Starfield was re-announced at Bethesda and Microsoft's E3 showing the other day. We got a snazzy new CG trailer, but yeah, like you said, Todd Howard has been doing interviews alongside a bunch of other Bethesda executives as well. But primarily, he talked to the Washington Post, who had a big look at what Starfield is, and that combined with a few other interviews, as well as some roundups by the likes of IGN, Forbes, etc. We finally got a better look at what Starfield actually is, because for as interesting as the cinematic trailer was and the reveal a few years ago, there were very few concrete details, but we now fortunately have something to chew on. The most obvious thing is actually what they mentioned in the conference, but it's been elaborated on a little bit, and that's essentially that they're coming out and just describing this new game as Starfield in space, which is what a lot of people, not Starfield in space, completely messed that up. I had one quote and I got it wrong. Skyrim in space, that's the one that they've been talking about, which a lot of people assumed anyway, because obviously, you know, just judging on how popular that is, how much it's a cornerstone of Bethesda as a whole, and how much all of their games are essentially a variation on the same formula. A lot of us expected that, but they've gone into a little bit more detail. They confirmed that it's again going to be a mix of first person and third person, though they admit that first person to them is the way to play it. However, they also said, and this is what is the most interesting thing to me, and I'll let you speak in a minute, but Todd Howard actually said, and I quote, "It's going to be a bit more hardcore of a role-playing game than we've ever done in the past." To me, this is music to my ear holes, because I really enjoyed Fallout 4. But a big issue, I secretly loved it deep down. But the issue, if any, that I've had with recent Bethesda games is how streamlined the RPG elements have become. So for them to re-embrace that and to deliver a more hardcore experience, even more so than anything they've done in the past, to me, that's exactly what I want out of Starfield.
Yeah, it's something that we've sort of like every RPG or anything with the RPG is sort of almost died in gaming, and everything is RPG elements, which is sort of like, well, we kind of did it, but we all know a lot of people want to shoot the thing or hit the thing with a stick, so just do that and don't really worry about the numbers as much. Just keep running around in a circle until you whittle its health down. But it's exciting that if anyone can sort of like do it, it's what maybe we get the next Mass Effect feels like a bit more like an RPG again. But then like with Starfield, like a new slate, you know, this is the first thing they've made sort of brand new in 25 years, as they say. So there's no like even though there's going to be expectations because it's Bethesda, so you expect something to hit you and to fly off into space and mammoths to be invincible for some reason and to kill dragons. But you also expect a certain level of like the first person sort of like RPG where you can, like me, nick some cabbages and put them in your house and things like that. But are we going to have the same lock picking game we've had for 25,000 years, or is it going to be a keypad this time? Who knows? But it's good to see that they're leading with this. I would like to think that there probably will be elements where you might be able to just do some shooty pow if you want, but anything. Yeah, totally. Anything diving into a hardcore RPG with a budget that it's going to have behind it, and with the power of like Xbox and Phil Spencer, like I'm here for it, and I would like to see them try going. I hate to use the term hardcore, but more of like a dedicated RPG than RPG elements. I use the word dedication this time.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's exactly what I want. Like you said, you know, they, throughout all of these interviews and all these tidbits, they're very much putting the focus on the fact that, like in other games, the player can essentially do whatever they want, and part of the RPG experience, as they describe it, they didn't go into too much detail, but they did confirm that you'll obviously have a huge amount of customization over your character. They also said that you can actually tailor your character's background, which we have seen in other RPGs like, you know, Mass Effect or recently Cyberpunk, although that didn't do it too well. But the idea of being able to tailor your character more intricately than before, you know, it's almost in direct opposition to Fallout 4, because in that game, for the first time ever, your character had like a very, very rigid, I suppose you had it in Fallout 3 as well, but you had a very rigid backstory. You had a voice, you saw your character before the war, before they were frozen, and it was much more of an authored person, whereas according to this, it seems like it's going to be much more free and have many more options for you to invest your own personality into it, invest your own kind of, role-playing experience, which is exactly what I want. Keep it on the...
Can I make a guess here?
Always.
Are you gonna... Is it gonna be, hey you, how long have you been asleep? And you're just gonna wake up in an escape pod, and it's gonna be Skyrim with some sort of bloke comes along and wakes you up, or some sort of alien bloke comes along and goes, all right mate, you've been in an escape pod for 100 years, get out of here. Something. Is it gonna be like that? Like, are we gonna wake up after a long time of sleep? That's what I want to know. But enough of my goofing, Josh. You've got the scoops on the street from Todd himself.
It's a very valid point you bring up there, actually, because the world that they've created, again, this was another thing that Todd Howard kept going on about. Apparently, they've got like documents and documents of the lore of the world. I think they even mentioned that they know every major event that happens every 10 decades. It was confirmed that the game is set 300-ish years into the future from where we are now. So that's a lot of history. So maybe, like you said, if you're picking up with someone who is, not been a part of this world for a while, it might make getting to know this world a little more easier if they're not, so ingrained in it, because the character will be learning alongside you. I don't know whether they're going to do that. They didn't mention that here, but that could be an option, Going back to the Skyrim comparisons, they mentioned that it's going to be bigger than Skyrim in terms of longevity. There was like hours and hours and hours of content that's being teased. They said that some of the base systems will return, the kind of general structure of being able to explore and go wherever you want. But apparently they've laid on a bunch more systems on top of that. They didn't reveal what that is right now. But essentially the entire gist of the game was summed up by Bethesda's managing director, who said that, quote, "For me, Starfield is the Han Solo simulator. Get in a ship, explore the galaxy, do fun stuff." And I feel like, if the gaming industry needs anything, it's a Han Solo simulator.
If I can't point at someone and then argue with whoever my companion is and eventually go, all right, yeah, let's get it on sort of thing, then it's not a Han Solo simulator, because I need to argue, point, and then have a furry creature to drive my ship for me. But no, I mean, it makes sense because Todd comes from the era where Lucasfilm was king, and Lucasfilm was making these things like Indiana Jones. We see the little sneaky man had all the idols and stuff in the back of his shots that at first no one took seriously. Like, oh, now they're making an indie game. And also like Star Wars, like his talking about space, he talks like every sort of like fan of George Lucas's work and Spielberg's work from that sort of time, and it feels like he's taking hopefully sort of like some aspects from that and bringing it into video games now. And I wonder and also hope that some things like because the characters could be a blank slate, right? But I hope the character has character, and I hope you can like it's weird, like a shepherd, or like in Fallout 4 you had voices for once for the first time forever, but you still felt sort of like I'm not knocking the voice actor, but someone reading another slate and someone that wasn't you or wasn't really a person of that world. So I hope that you do feel like if you're going to be a Han Solo simulator, you feel a bit more like a scoundrel, someone who's got oomph to them, and someone who can be cocky and be a paragon or a renegade, for lack of better terms.
No, I know what you mean. Even though you want that character to be highly influenced by your own decisions, you want to make sure that whatever route you go down, the character has personality. Exactly what you said. You want to be able to really inject elements of charisma, elements of antagonism, elements of aggression, elements of hope into that person, and see how it plays out. Whether or not, I mean, I don't know if it's actually confirmed if they're going to have a fully voiced character. That'll be fascinating. Jumping back to what the managing director said, though, it actually touches on something that has been rumored and discussed way before the game was re-unveiled, and that's whether or not you're going to be able to explore an entire galaxy, No Man's Sky style, because a lot of people were wondering, obviously there's a ship involved, obviously you're skimming from planet to planet, how expansive is that going to be, and how is it going to change the open world formula? They confirmed here that it's not going to be a full-on entire galaxy to explore. You're not going to be jumping from planet to planet to planet, and it's not going to be procedurally generated or anything like that, but it does sound like we're going to have a handful of places to go to, and each one is going to have, its own cities. They mentioned about how they've built cities like we're in Fallout, like we're and Skyrim in the past, and how they're going to have a bunch of different ones of those around. So essentially it's going to be similar, I think, to the Outer Worlds, where that was a semi-open world game, but each world was kind of like its own hub, and it brought more variety to the thing. If you look at the screenshots for Starfield at the moment, you can also get a glimpse of those different worlds. You know, they're very, very different, and to me, that's cool. It's difficult to pull off like a real sandbox experience, I think, when you have a bunch of different hubs, but we've seen games like The Witcher, we've seen games like The Outer Worlds pull it off, and Bethesda has been working on this long enough that I feel like you need the ability to jump in a ship and go from one location to the other to really fulfill that dream of, like they say, being in this space Han Solo-esque simulator thing.
Yeah, it feels like I'm trying to think of the Outer Worlds. Not Outer Worlds. Yes. Already stole their lunch and did the sort of thing that they're going to do, but probably to a much larger scale, because they're going to have a lot more time on it, I guess, and budget and all those sort of things. But with this, I hope that when we do go to other planets, they feel like other planets. They don't just feel like, here's some sand, here's some snow, you know what I mean? Here's a forest. And I hope they do. Outer Worlds did that. Worlds, God's sake, did that to an extent. That's just the curse right now. Did that to an extent, but I feel like it still sort of fell back into some sort of like familiar looking trappings. Of course, we don't know. They haven't really mentioned anything about aliens, or if this is just space Earth colonies. I expect this, or they did say something about aliens. I missed it. Did they?
They briefly touched upon it. They briefly said that there's going to be some robots in the game, but I don't imagine they're going to be full-on like animatronic style things. Maybe just more like AIs and stuff. And they did kind of confirm that there would be alien-type things on other planets. We don't know whether they're going to be proper like sentient aliens that you can have a conversation with, whether they're going to be kind of more like animals or whatever, or just kind of like plant-based things. I don't know, but there's going to be something to find when you're out in exploring, so that's quite interesting. They also mentioned a lot about... Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, are we going to come across this game's version of Krogan's or Gungans or something like that, or are they all going to be sort of like monsters and beasts?
Dude, get the Gungans in there, I think. They also said that as part of the story, you know, like I said, they confirmed that it was 300 years in the future. They confirmed that you're going to join a bunch of different factions if you want, and they said that initially you're part of the Constellation, which was described by the Washington Post as, quote, the last group of space explorers. So essentially this whole thing is being described as like humanity's last adventure into space. No one knows what that means. It sounds mysterious and cool, but the general presentation, going back to something that you mentioned earlier about like Lucasfilm and George Lucas and Indiana Jones, Star Wars and stuff, you know, Todd has been very open with the influences on the aesthetic, and he said that it's very much inspired by 70s sci-fi, you know, like those early Star Wars movies, Battlestar Galactica, and Star Trek. They were all movies and properties that he named. However, he also said that the general aesthetic of space was something that they kind of like struggled to get a handle on for a long time, but they've kind of settled on this 1960s-esque space age aesthetic. You know, we got to look at that in the trailer, like the bulky spacesuits, the spaceships with like loads of different buttons on, with a very mechanical feel. And he's described the act of space flight as being reminiscent of 1940s flight. So he said it's like very dangerous, very rickety, and that's the kind of aesthetic that I really like, and I don't think we've seen done much in games before. Like that setting, those influences, that's actually the thing that excites me the most, because we've seen sci-fi that just jumps way into the future. You know, for as much as I love Mass Effect, we've seen stuff like that before. Get this retro style for a full big blockbuster game. We haven't really seen it, and that makes me really, really excited.
Yeah, I wonder if that's just gonna be sort of like ships, or if it's like entire space stations are gonna be cramped. Yeah. Like I'm just trying to think, like an Ad Astra or something like that. Or it's not gonna be sort of like pseudo futuristic, like an interstellar where you can walk around. And are we gonna be floating through small pipes basically, or are we gonna be walking around? Is there gonna be like fake gravity in ships? I'm wondering with that sort of thing and how that translates to buildings. Like, are we gonna? They said they're going to be cities, so people got to be pretty advanced, however it goes. But then, like, when we get to these cities, are they going to feel like more slapdash thrown together, like, say, something in Aliens, you know, Hadley's Hope? Or are we going to have something like actually built up in like in the Outer Worlds, where not worlds, where you've got points. Like certain places have like garages and things. Like there's so much to wonder when you've just seen a few clips and listen to Todd's subtle tones just sort of like massage us through the video. So I'm here for it. I hope it's a blend of the both. You don't need to, probably won't go all cramped and like, sort of what makes sense for building on other planets, but I'm excited. And I just, I'm excited for something new. I'm excited for something that is also on a new engine.
Yes, I was just about to say, I mean, that's what's exciting me most about this. We've heard Todd Howard talk up ideas before that haven't been well executed in practice. But for this one, I feel like it's almost too much of a passion project for him to completely fumble. Obviously, it's not all of him. He's got a full team behind him of literally hundreds of people. But at the same time, this has been in development for I think they mentioned they started early work on it in 2013, properly kicked into gear when Fallout 4 launched, but they've been wanting to do a sci-fi game for the longest time. There's a really cool tidbit in the Washington Post article, which you should definitely check out if you can, where Todd actually mentions that in the 2000s, they wanted to do a sci-fi game so bad, they actually pitched to do a Star Trek RPG, and then they didn't get to do it. So this is something that he's been obviously gestating for a while. It is a passion project, like you said. It's on a new engine, which is really exciting. They talked about the release date, which is the 11th of the 11th, 2022, 11 years after Skyrim came out, and they were talking about how they were confident about that, how they wouldn't announce it so early, we're more or less, a year and a half out from that. They said they wouldn't have announced it if they weren't confident they could hit it, so that's cool. And I think generally the takeaway is that, it's going to be Skyrim in space. They're going for this Han Solo style simulator. And there's going to be a bunch of different worlds, but it's not going to be this massive universe full of possibilities. And essentially, if you like their other work, it's going to be more of the same, but hopefully bigger and hopefully better.
Yeah, and hopefully there is some of the jank there, and hopefully someone puts Randy Savage on your spaceship at some point, and we get the memes out of this game for the next decade to come. It feels like the way Todd is speaking about this, I'm not saying he's going to be done, but it feels like sort of a swan song series, how he's been in gaming so long, and to put one of these games together, going from where we're going to put the buttons on the ship to what people eat in the universe to what's been going on every decade for the past 300 years. It takes a lot out of someone. That creativity doesn't I'm not saying he's going to run out, but that doesn't last forever either. So it feels like it's just the next big push and sort of bring Bethesda forward, and it just feels like almost like a natural conclusion from if you imagine his career from little scrappy making the boxes for his games until creating this grand universe. It's nice to see, and I'm excited. And put it this way, this game has a date and Halo Infinite does not. So if there's at least some sort of confidence there, and I don't really remember any time they've majorly delayed their games before. So I feel like obviously there's secret delays all the time, but I don't remember any time where a Bethesda game has gone, we're going to go in the bin for a bit. So I'm looking forward to it. And
me too.
I think unless you've got any more super duper scoops from Todd himself, Josh.
I think that's all the scoops that I've got. Like I said, there was a little bit more stuff on the background in the interviews and on the other roundups that I mentioned, so you can check those out. But I think that's all of the actual confirmed gameplay deals that we have.
And that's Toddwatch, everyone. Thanks for watching. This has been WhatCulture, not the WhatCulture Gaming Podcast, like I almost said, but I'm saying it now, so whatever. I've been Ben Returner. You can follow me on Twitter at Ben Returner. They can follow you, Josh, as I follow my words.
On Twitter, and Josh Brune with 2 O's. It's all right, man. It's post E3. It's very hot. I don't blame you.
#Toddwatch. We'll see you all soon. Good night.
Good night.